Okay. Welcome everyone to today's listening session for the California Truth and Healing Council. We are recording, so just keep that in mind as you have comments and questions, and we will be posting the recordings to the website at the end of this week. I'm Christina Snyder. I'm the Governor's Tribal Advisor. I'm a member of the Dry Creek Pomo. And before we get started, I do want to introduce Loretta Miranda, if she's willing to go on cam, who is my Chief Deputy and will be running some of these listening sessions as we move forward. Loretta?
Yes, I may have had my camera off because I was eating some ice cream, but my name is Loretta Miranda. I am the Chief Deputy Tribal Advisor and Special Counsel for the Tribal Advisor's Office. I am Serrano and Cupeño. I'm a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians in Southern California, and happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome, thank you. And then I didn't see any council members, but as they join and if they join, we will introduce them into the group as well. So very quickly, I'll give an overview of these listening sessions. I'm then going to go into an overview of the Truth and Healing Council itself for those of you that are just joining us now in this effort. And then I'll give you a brief update of what the council has done and where we're at in the whole process right now. Once we do that, as people feel comfortable, it would be great if we can get people on camera to introduce themselves and let us know why they're joining. But also, we really view this as more as an open discussion where we are listening, we're learning, and we're hearing a lot of different things and different viewpoints from people about how to move forward. And so please do not feel like you are time limited in what you have to say. Everything is welcome. We do ask that you, ensure that we're creating a welcoming space. But again, at that point, we'll kind of open it up, and if anyone has questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, we just kind of want to have an open discussion. So these virtual listening sessions were done at the prompting of the council, who wanted to have more opportunities for community input. And because this council is designed to be community driven, it made sense to do this more often than not. The council itself meets or will in normal practice be meeting on a quarterly basis, and I'll be talking a bit more about that in a second, but did want to have opportunities for community engagement, community input along the way to inform the work and the decision-making process. And given that there's so many people and so many communities and so many viewpoints that need to be captured in this work, wanted to make more opportunities. These meetings will be held virtually for now, pending the COVID pandemic. The state itself has basically directive of no non-essential travel. So once it becomes safe to travel and to do more mixing, these sessions will be held on a regional basis in person, but with also an internet option to ensure that we're getting people in person in communities and getting that kind of engagement, but then also providing an avenue for people to engage in a space like this on equal terms. This week's schedule is that Monday there was the Northern Region listening session. Tuesday was the Central Region listening session. Today is Southern Region. And then tomorrow is Eastern Region. These sessions are open to the public. Again, they're recorded, and we'll be having notes that we'll be providing to both the council, but then posting for public review to see kind of what was discussed in these listening sessions. I think that is about it as the overview. One thing I want to say is that while we do divide them by regions, that's in anticipation of moving forward into an in-person venue, so that the regions will be, as we rotate, it'll be, we'll hold Northern Region listening sessions, and then in the north part of the state, Eastern, in the Eastern Sierras, throughout the, well, I guess in the Eastern Region. How did we define? I think that is the Eastern Sierras. Central in the southern, in this central area of the state. We're getting to midweek, so my brain's all over the place. And then southern down in San Diego or Imperial counties. So that's why we've kept them regional, even though we're in this Zoom space. But really, how you choose to engage is self-defined. So if you are from a Southern California tribe, but you live in Northern California, you are welcome to attend either of those sessions. You can even attend sessions outside of your region, up to you. We are not going to dictate how you engage with this group. So I am very quickly going to go through an overview of the council itself for everyone's benefit. And then moving forward, we had a suggestion on Monday to have, kind of a consolidated update. And so we'll be doing that moving forward prior to these listening sessions so that we don't have to spend as much time going over, the council itself, where it's at, what the updates are. And we can do that in kind of a more concise format rather than an overview presentation. That update doesn't exist yet. So for now, we're going to go through the presentation, but in the next round of listening sessions, which will be a month from now, and we'll have those dates go out on Friday. Those will have a more, consolidated update sheet. In addition, we got a suggestion to have a more consolidated space for updates. So we are looking into creating probably a WordPress where everyone can just go and see what the latest news is, see where all the recordings are, and have that be more of a one-stop shop instead of having to kind of navigate a bunch of different places. So I'm going to share my screen now and very quickly go over everything. Okay. Can you see that, Loretta? I can see your screen, or you can nod. Okay, cool. So that is the end of the presentation. Let's go to the beginning. So the Truth in Healing Council is a council created by Governor Gavin Newsom via executive order and made up of representatives from California Native American tribes, but can also include relevant state and local agencies and other relevant non-governmental stakeholders. It's led and convened by the governor's tribal advisor and is limited term, or was envisioned being limited term under the scope of the executive order, but has a final written report due on January 1st, 2025. What I want to point to here is that because it's under executive order, it means it's under the authority of the governor. So it applies to all of his agencies and departments. Does not apply to certain other areas like the UC, for example, though this council can examine the UC and its role in this space, though not necessarily compel them to do anything under this specific work, but can have in its recommendations something that applies to that space, and can ask them to partner with us. And then I also, it includes representatives from California Native American tribes, and that is mandatory, but it also has the potential to include other folks as well, and that's going to be at the initiative of the council. Under the executive order, the council is charged with bearing witness to, recording, examining existing documentation of, and receiving California Native American narratives regarding the historical relationship between the state and California Native Americans in order to clarify the historical record of that relationship in the spirit of truth and healing. And so that's a lot of words, but really what the council does is that it's, it was designed to create a space for Native American experiences and narratives to control the outcome, historical record of what happened here, rather than from a non-Native archaeological or external perspective, or a different government organization perspective. So it's really designed to create a space for Native people to lead the narrative on their experience here, and what the state did and what the state was responsible for doing at its inception. It's also required to report annually and then submit a final written report of findings to the Office of the Tribal Advisor by January 1st, 2025. As envisioned, it aims to reflect a holistic understanding of the historical relationship between California Native Americans and the state. And I put in here that it will be modeled on similar truth and reconciliation documents, but that's up to the council to decide, really. it can be modeled off similar truth and reconciliation documents. And the thinking behind that was that, you know, if it wants to be a model for international engagement, then it, you know, it might make sense to have something that is recognizable to other communities. But honestly, this is the first of its kind type of thing, and it's driven by from a Native perspective. So it should reflect what the Native perspective wants and needs, and isn't necessarily bound by other mechanisms or models. Can it examine reparations? Yes. So under the charter, the council can examine and make recommendations aimed at the reparation and restoration of, well, at reparation and restoration, and consider how to prevent similar depredations or policies in the future. In practice, this means that the council can make recommendations that are linked to the historical injustices, and that can be anything. And it's up to kind of the council and the community to determine what those recommendations might be. It's organized under a charter and is made up of voting members and non-voting members. There are 12 voting members, and they all have to be representative of California Native American tribes. And then there's also 4 alternate voting members who are not voting members unless the voting members that were designated are not in attendance for purposes of quorum. Of the 12 voting members, 3 must be from southern, central, and northern and eastern geographical areas of the state, respectively. And in each of those areas, one of the 3 needs to be from a non-federally recognized tribe on the list maintained by the Native American Heritage Commission. Membership as a voting member is available to both the duly elected officials or appointed designees of California Native American tribes. And so this was to allow for people who had already had the representative authority of their communities to be placed on this council, but also if there were other people that the tribe generally supported as being the right person for this work, that they could also serve on the council. So the current council has a mix of elected officials and appointed designees. And then it also accounts for if any of those elected officials are no longer elected officials, as long as their tribe reiterates their support for them being on this council, then they can remain. The idea is that this is a seated council that remains for the duration of the work for continuity. But again, want to account for the possibility that some folks may no longer be supported by their tribe. So there is, a method for and a mechanism for that. There are also non-voting members on the council, and that can include, but would not be limited to, representatives from state and local agencies, academics, and community leaders. There's no cap on non-voting members, but right now, in the last meeting, the council decided that they're going to put a hold on thinking about how to integrate non-voting members and how do you appoint non-voting members, as they're kind of trying to figure out a lot of the business first and how build a foundation for this work before moving forward and inviting other folks to the table. I forgot to note, but I did want to mention too that the council, and this is in the executive order, their charge is to receive narratives, experiences, viewpoints, primary source documentation. It's not to drive the work of the council. They're basically just the decision-making body. So if they're going to create subcommittees, if they're going to create, if they're going to decide what are the discrete areas to look at, those are the decisions they're going to make as the decision-making body. But really, all of this work is primarily community driven because it has to be. Okay. Public participation. So the council welcomes and encourages all available methods for public participation, and that includes attending and observing meetings of the council unless there's closed session proceedings, submitting written comments, making oral statements and testimony, participating in interactive dialogues, panel discussions, and informal meetings like this, organizing and hosting affiliate events on issues relevant to the work of the council, and then can also join subcommittee work as it moves forward. And I'll give you an update on that in just a second. this is just for visual, the council structure in the hierarchy of decision making. But again, not super relevant in terms of who has a voice, since everybody gets a voice. The structure was adopted based on tribal consultation responses and an extensive review of similar international mechanisms. And because it will be the first entity of its kind, it's critical that tribal governments and the broader California Native population drive the work of the council, but also want to account for and acknowledge and include a space for non-Native populations or non-California Natives to support, to amplify, to process their role in a way that makes sense for the council. So the council will be thinking about that as well. But really just, as a baseline, this structure was created as a space for California Native people to process, heal, think through, examine, poke at all of this foundation for ongoing systemic, historical, all of the trauma. And so really, as other folks are engaged, it's just so important that that is done in a way that is respectful. And so looking forward to hearing folks' thoughts on that as well, as we open up. So if you're a tribe, I'm also required to consult with all of the tribes before 2024. I may have to extend that timeline just because of COVID. Right now we're doing just everything is via Zoom, and I am very happy to have an initial consultation or an initial check-in with tribes at their request. But really, once we get out into a space where it's safer to travel, we'll make every effort to come to wherever makes sense for tribal communities in order to capture this. And part of this is that we have a budget for transcription and recording. So where there is comfort in creating kind of that record, we can accommodate that and incorporate that as well. California Native Americans are all welcome to participate and join, regardless of enrollment status, regardless of anything. Because this is a shared history, it's important that everybody has a space here. And then academics are encouraged to participate in the work of the council, and that can be kind of anything and everything. I'll talk a bit about the subcommittees that the council has created, but they'll be working to examine what partnerships they want to engage in. NGOs as well are encouraged to amplify support as needed. And so we've had a few NGOs approach staff about how they can help facilitate conversations in spaces that the council probably shouldn't be or doesn't really have a role in examining. For example, we had the Catholic Church, an organization, came forward to see what they could do to kind of help facilitate conversations about their role in the missionization of California. And while that may not be totally within the purview of this council, it is very much some of the work that we anticipated should be happening aligned with this council. And so typically with this kind of work, at least at the international level, NGOs will participate in alignment with some of the meetings, and they'll have meetings around the main meeting. And so we are very much open to thinking about how to set up affiliate events, affiliate meetings, and help get the word out for those kind of convenings as well. And then we're open to partnerships from organizations, including research and scholarship, documentary filmmaking, emotional community and behavioral support, and media and comms. We are going to have more of a conversation internally with staff, but the council itself is also going to, as I'll mention in a moment, probably create a couple of subcommittees to examine all of this and see how they want to move forward. But very much open to the limitation is your imagination and its ability to, the idea's ability to fit within this framework. And so very much, the council is very much open to all of this. In real time, like once the council has been established, the council will meet on a quarterly basis over 2 days in March, June, September, and December. and we'll work with transparency, and we'll encourage all available methods of public participation. And then all of those recordings are available at the Tribal Advisors website. And I'll put that link in the chat when we get into the conversation. Day one is going to be a facilitated talking circle using the expertise of a culturally appropriate wellness practitioner or practitioners. That's something that we also want to hear a bit more about, who will be able to connect participants with tools to work through historical trauma and the work of the council. We also had a conversation yesterday about the role of arts in healing, and may think about that with the council about how to incorporate traditional and modern and contemporary practitioners and artists to help kind of facilitate some of that. Day two will be more of a hearing style meeting on historical findings, evidence, outcomes, and experiences from day one as directed by the council. And then the culturally appropriate wellness practitioner is anticipated to also provide participants with tools and mechanisms to process this kind of trauma in a productive way. Right now, everything is via Zoom and also available on CalSpan until COVID lets up a bit. But then once COVID conditions alleviate, the council will be rotating its meetings in the 4 geographical areas throughout the state. And that is, you know, by design, so that we can have a lot of community-driven engagement. So for example, if there is a meeting in Reading, would probably want to design a lot of the agenda around getting the perspectives of the local community, both the non-native and native perspectives as directed by the council. So this is a dated presentation. So I will stop sharing, and then I'll give you a quick update on where the council is at. So the council met in February, and oh, it's right in front of me, what I'm trying to look for. The council met in February to follow up on some of the business that they had discussed in their December meeting. They had an initial 2-day meeting on December 3rd and 4th, and those recordings are available on the website. And, you know, had an acknowledgement in that meeting about the fact that there's a lot that needs to get done, and there's a lot of structural and business work that needs to get done in order to move forward in a way that makes sense. And so wanted to have a business meeting to follow up. They held a business meeting in February and got through about half of the agenda, but also determined that we'll probably have the council meet more frequently than quarterly for at least the next 6 months to a year to kind of get all of that foundational work done, so that the meetings can look more like how they're supposed to once all of the foundation is in place. So in that business meeting, well, let me back up. In the December meeting, they finalized the charter, and I'm going to put that in the chat if folks want to see it. And then they requested, or they thought about potentially adopting bylaws just to frame the way that they do work. In the last meeting, they considered some draft bylaws, which they will probably amend and possibly adopt in the next meeting. And here's the draft bylaws. And that's really just to frame the work and how everything moves forward. They also talked a bit about the scope of the work in the initial meeting in December. And just to back up, all of these updates I'll be putting in a document, and Loretta and I will be sharing this out before the next round of listening sessions, so everybody's kind of on the same page. But in that December meeting, there had been a lot of discussion about like, how do we get our arms around something that's so big and open-ended? And in the executive order, it was drafted to be as open-ended as possible so that the state itself was not taking a look at what maybe Native people needed, in order to heal and to look at, and really was trying to keep it as open-ended as possible to, have that be community driven and dictated by the community itself. And so part of what the council is trying to think about is how to get their arms around that, and came to a kind of consensus that for now they'd like to engage in a lot more listening, and just kind of listen to community feedback, start having more open-ended discussion sessions with the community, and then reverse engineer basically, or like think a bit more about the buckets that they might want to look at in a more organized way, if that makes sense, or if the open-ended discussions actually are more fruitful. So right now, they're going to engage in kind of a listening season to get their head around what everybody is thinking. And one of our council members, and for purposes of the council, we actually are calling them all council members, even though we know some of them actually have ranks higher than a council member. But just for the purposes of the council, thought that would be a good way to kind of have like a level set, given that some folks are not elected officials. And want to make sure that there's not kind of an internal hierarchy. But so one of the council members suggested, Councilmember Maccaro suggested that that the council think about, and that the community think about, what are all of the things that the state should be sorry for? And we all know them. Native people all know what those line items are. So let's discuss all of that, and then we can think about how to organize and how to frame all of that in a way that makes sense to actually connect it to ongoing systemic injustices, in a way that you could organize thoughts about how to repair and how to restore. So that was a lot. But really, if we say like, we know that hashtag land back is a thing. So what does that look like? What happened? What do we know about our communities that they were dispossessed? We heard the other day, that there was one community member who the family home that her family built in their ancestral lands was dispossessed using the law, but a law that was unfair and designed to dispossess from Native people. That home that was built by her family, by a rancher, and then, pass along, and it's still in existence. And how, examining that, what's going on, is that linked to a bigger issue? And then also making a recommendation about how to then flip that script and try to undo, or at least try to do better in those spaces, having more of an acknowledgement of that historical wrong. So that was something that they discussed. So I'm just putting that out there. And then, so the council scope, again, they have discussed very frequently. So I don't want folks to feel like this is not something that they're considering. The injustices due to both, well, not both, because there's a big list, to the unratified treaties, termination, non-recognition or never getting recognized, some chat about disenrollment. There's a lot of things that have been kind of popping in that discussion. And then we had one council member yesterday suggest to linking all of those things to who's kind of on first for them, agency-wise. And I think from the tribal advisor side, we can help organize all of that in terms of like what buckets go where. So if we say like, the University of California should be taking more responsibility over the fact that they are land grant institutions that benefit from this, but that tribal nations and tribal people are like historically underrepresented in those places. In some spaces, there's glorification of people that massacred Native people. So how, and so we can, on the tribal advisor side, sort out who gets to be responsible for that, whether it's like, Native people couldn't serve as witnesses in courts. So let's go talk to the, you know, judicial council about that. So I will stop rambling in just a second, I swear. And so what they decided to was to kind of just collect more and then think about organization a little down the road. And then are thinking about some subcommittees that are not necessarily issue area based yet until they start thinking more about what the incoming is. But they are, they have created a youth council, but have not staffed it yet. So it's in process. By the next meeting, they'll have two of their, the council members will be staffing it and will be taking the lead on that. And that will be to incorporate the youth voice into this space and the youth experience into this space, which will be critical for some of these ongoing suggestions, recommendations, healing processes. And then a subcommittee for academic partnerships. And so that really was designed because staff has been getting a lot of incoming from different academic institutions about how they can be helpful or that they're doing work that's aligned with it, and they'd like to talk about how they can incorporate that work, or whether, you know, they have a lot of just like source material or they have a fellowship available or whatever it is. And so that subcommittee, which is also not staffed, was created and will be staffed in the next meeting as well. And then they're going to consider a funding partnerships subcommittee, which will be focused on really driving the work and also receiving the and kind of working through all of the partnerships on, you know, if someone wants to sponsor either on the reparations and restoration side, sponsor that piece, or sponsor some of the work of the council, like a documentarian. So they did not get to the rest of the agenda, and so they didn't get to the funding piece. They also didn't get to the culturally informed wellness practitioner piece, but that's actually, we do want a bit more community input on that. And I'm going to send you a link to the Google form where you can take a look at the questions we have, and it's basically, they like to get a better idea of the types of community emotional wellness support that might be most helpful for the community. The state has some funding to support this, so we just kind of want to understand from the council and from the community what would be most helpful. It's sounding like having more options is better, but you know, having kind of, you know, given the different cultural differences, but also having someone that we can have facilitate some of these really difficult discussions, and give people tools to process rather than having to relive over and over without being able to heal from it, is what really we're trying to do here. I'm also very quickly, some meetings moving forward and starting from February are posted here on CalSpan if you'd like to take a look. We've also got them at the Truth and Healing Council website. And I'm going to put that link in too. And all of the materials and everything will be posted on this page. And so there's recordings from December are there as well. And also the draft bylaws and the draft charter from before there as well. And then I have one last thing. We have a couple of things. I'm going to share my screen real quick. A couple of ways for you to engage. And we also want to hear a bit more about how we can better engage. But at the Truth and Healing Council landing page, which is tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC, there is, you can subscribe to receive notifications here, or you can request consultation here. If you are not a tribe and you want a meeting anyway, you can also use this. Just put your organization or where you're from here, but this is this is designed for consultation. Right now we're not doing anything in person, but we can accommodate your request as needed, or you can also email info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov, and I'll put that in the chat. So after that very long monologue, we'd like to open it up to discussion. And I think I'd like to just kind of frame this a bit, because I think that there are expectations, or we've seen that there might be expectations about how people can engage. Really, we just want this to be an open discussion. So if you have general thoughts, comments, feedback, anything, this is the time to do it. We do appreciate cams on, but you don't have to if you're not comfortable. But before we go into that, or as we go into that, it would be great if we could, if you are comfortable going off camera, introducing yourself, talking a bit about, your involvement in the council and what you hope to see from it. Or if you just want to introduce yourself and give general comments and feedback or ask us questions, we would love to have that as well. So I'm going to mute myself and see if anyone has anything, or if they'd like to introduce themselves. And if you've dialed in, it's *6 to unmute your line. And actually, Loretta, have I covered everything?
Yeah, I think that was a good overview, and I think just emphasizing that these sessions, like, we just want to hear from the community, because this is a community-driven project. And so, and again, if you feel comfortable introducing yourself, that would be great, but it is recorded. So if you're not comfortable, then that's totally fine as well.
Gerald, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh, and I forgot to say, you can raise your hand if that feels right. Otherwise, you can also just unmute and start talking, as long as you're not talking over each other.
So hello, my name is Gerald Clark Jr. I'm a tribal council member for the Cahuilla Band of Indians down here in Riverside County. I'm also assistant professor of ethnic studies at UC Riverside. And yeah, I was just interested in the council and the work of the council and how we can participate. I'm not sure what comments you want from us. I'm kind of new, and so I'm interested in learning more. I agree, your comments on the UC system as land grant institutions, and I agree there's probably a 1,000 different perspectives on what reparations mean, right? And so I just, I'm here to listen and learn, and I have some ideas that I can throw out in the mix, but yeah, that's it. I'm glad you're doing this.
Thank you. And if you want to share your ideas now, you can, or you can wait until folks kind of get a bit more into it. But really, one of the things that was discussed a lot yesterday was the role of education, both in terms of curriculum, but also having more Native teachers throughout the system and supporting Native people in spaces where they're teaching other Native people. So that was part of some of the discussions that were popping out yesterday.
Well, so I'll stand back here a minute and let everybody else talk.
Great, thank you. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves to the group?
I'll introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Lopez Kiefer. I'm a member of the San Luis Rey Band of Mission Indians in Southern California. And I'm attending today with a slightly different hat on. I'm also the director of the Office of Native American Affairs at the Attorney General's Office, California Department of Justice. And the Attorney General wants to make sure that we are listening, and that if the Department of Justice can be of any assistance, that we provide that. So, but I'm also listening because I'm a California Indian, and I really like to see what this council can do. And I have the utmost confidence in Christina Snyder helping bring this to fruition. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. We had a raised hand and then it went down. Kimberly.
Yes, it was me. Hi. My name is Kimberly Morales Johnson. I'm Gabrielino Tongva, San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians. So speaking to that, I happen to teach special ed down here in the Los Angeles area, but I will be moving up to Davis next fall. I serve as a Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commissioner for LA County. I'm also Tribal Secretary for San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians. I'm very passionate about education and truth and healing for all Native people, especially in Los Angeles County. And I'm very excited that you're having these circles because I talked to my dad about these things. He's 78 years old and he's like, wait, they're doing what? Like he's still, his colonized mindset, you know, he still has a hard time understanding that people really do want to hear from us and that you value our input and our experiences. So thank you very much for providing the space.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And we did have a conversation with the executive director of the LA Indian Commission because she wants to do something similar down there, which I think is amazing. And so that's one of those things that we really, Loretta and I can't do everything, but we can help encourage other people and we can help them do similar processes and facilitate similar examinations, especially in places like LA County, which are so problematic, but also so glamorized. Really excited to see what happens down there and also how we can be helpful from this seat too.
Hilly, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Corey, and I am disenrolled from Picayune Rancheria of Chichansi Indians in Central California. I do have a son that also was disenrolled that lives in the southern region. And so I just wanted to say that with 11,000 Indian people disenrolled throughout the United States, and several thousand of them being in the southern region, I'm excited and thankful that this issue is being addressed in this forum. I think that hearing that the CARES people are also listening, I would say that, you know, it's great that a huge package is coming out to Indian country from the federal government, but in general, the disenrolled, non-recognized urban Indian communities, that's not going to be really very helpful to. And so I think that to have a place at the table in this healing discussion is really important. And I just want to thank you for that. I'm not going to take any more time. So thank you again very much.
Thank you. And again, your comment, you're allowed to take as much time as you want. So if you have more thoughts, feel free to have more thoughts. And also if you have ideas about how the council can think about that more, we would love to hear that too.
All right, thank you. I'll be organizing my thoughts on that.
And I'll just you don't have to speak on it, but even if there's ideas or if you yourself, because they're looking at kind of challenges and working backward from there, if you yourself are seeing challenges to things like, you know, accessing, you know, traditional sites, accessing resources for, you know, your family, accessing things that are yours by birthright, then that's something I think they'd want to hear.
Yes, this is very true. I mean, a lot of people do have trouble accessing Indian health, even though anyone on the judgment roll in California is supposed to be eligible for services through Indian health in California. A lot of people really do have trouble accessing that and they get turned away, etc. And another thing is the scholarships. A lot of the Native supported scholarships for education. Point in fact, my daughter lost a $4,000 a year scholarship when we were disenrolled in 2006, and she subsequently had to withdraw from school. She was attending San Francisco State University with a minor in American Indian Studies. And so, you know, many people are not eligible unless they're federally recognized for Native scholarships. And it really is a big disservice, not to mention the spiritual and cultural, you know, hardships that we have being separated from our community. So again, I think those are pretty valid issues to be addressed. And I think that most of the unrecognized, disenrolled, and state recognized tribal members would voice the same concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a raised hand from Janelle. If you'd like to unmute.
Hi, thank you so much for hosting this space. I'm the oldest of four. I am a descendant of the Tongva Native American tribe. I've only recently started to delve into my own heritage and my own culture, and I'm learning so much from family, but I'm often finding that it's difficult to get older family members to talk about what they know, because it's oftentimes like a very painful past for them. But I can see, and I don't know if you guys are affiliated with the Indigenous Wellness Circle, but I was in a different group yesterday, and they did a great presentation on epigenetics and as it pertains to Native Americans in particular. And it just kind of really confirmed like a lot of things that I feel about my own family. And I think that providing that kind of education to Native American people, and it should be like widely known about, we should all have access to this information, because it will help us understand how we came to be maybe the way that we are as far as trauma goes, and the things that we carry and how we feel and how we function in the world. I think that education should be free to us, and it should be, you know, we should know about it. I had to really dig for that. So that's one thing. And I mean, as far as like, you know, the whole land back thing goes, I'm very active in the community as far as what's happening with Pavagna. And this whole situation has just been like immensely stressful. And I never knew that not having knowledge about your heritage and your culture, that could actually affect you in a certain way. But I really feel like I was robbed of so many things that I should have already known about. And it's really heartbreaking, because so many of my family members have been affected by this, you know, colonialism and all these different things. And my dad is actually in the hospital right now. And I feel like what's happened to him is directly related to his trauma. And it's just something that he never was able to heal, because there's so much stigma around it. And I just feel like those resources should be available to, you know, to Native Americans. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, and we appreciate your input. And we'll think about how to incorporate that. This is, I want to say, the second mention that we've had of the Native Wellness Group, and how they might be actually also helpful. And this is good to know about, that they have some good educational resources, because I think that can be definitely incorporated into the healing circles. Because that's the idea, is to provide Native people with the tools to process and understand what's happening here, and not, you know, we have higher rates of kind of everything, and a lot of that, both it's epigenetic, but it's also, you know, this incredible burden of being part of a population that was targeted for genocide. And
yes.
So you've got this whole thing. And so it'd be great if we could incorporate that into this space, so that people can understand that their behavior and their reactions and the way they operate with their families, with the world, and how they, and in a place where you're largely invisible, and are made to feel like you are not wanted or welcome by design, I think will be really helpful for the group. We heard too the other day that they have some helpful they'll facilitate some conversations with non-Native populations about how to actually work on these kind of issues as an ally and in a supportive space without taking up too much space. And so we're thinking about potentially talking to them about facilitating a space for the non-Native allies to start kind of thinking about how they can respectfully engage with this work so that we have fewer kind of hiccups down the road.
Thank you, Christina. I'd also just like to say, if there could be some sort of a task force to kind of comb through public information, such as that what lives on Wikipedia and different things like that, to fact check different historical events and different historical figures that I feel the way they're presented online and in certain educational institutions, they're not factually accurate. And there is other information out there that it could help correct it, but it would obviously take time for people to comb through these things. But I think that's another way that we can actually sort of start righting the wrongs that have been done. Thank you. I'm done speaking.
Thank you. I really, that is such an interesting suggestion. And now my wheels are spinning about what could be done there. And even that there's like probably process that could be done where in order for something to be like verified or presented as actual fact, you'd need to get it from the actual source community.
That is an interesting point. I mean, I can give you an example. In particular, I'm thinking about, I was looking at the California legislative information that's available about AB 2272, about Native American lands. And specifically, it was talking about land that, the Tongva people were supposed to have, but that we were actually never given. It was sort of these 18 lost treaties. And the land actually went to someone named Edward Beale, and he was he was in charge of the land. He was the superintendent of Native American affairs or Indian affairs. And he incorporated the land that was supposed to be ours into his own ranch called Tejon Ranch. And it's still to this day, it's not our land. So those kinds of things are like, in particular, what I'm thinking about, because if you look him up on Wikipedia, there's no mention of that information at all.
Got it. That's very, it's very helpful. And it's basically being written out of history, which also supports invisibility.
Exactly.
And Janelle, if I can ask a question.
Sure.
It's the Indigenous Wellness Circle, right? Because I think the conversations we had yesterday were about the Wellness Institute. So I just want to know, is this the Southern California organization that was at the circle yesterday?
They are called the Indigenous Circle of Wellness on Instagram. I don't know if that's exactly their name, but I believe it is. And they call themselves a mental health service, culturally inclusive counseling and wellness for BIPOC. So, and it's Native women owned and operated, which I think is really cool. So they're doing some really great things, and I really admire that. Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate the input. And
You're so welcome.
Great. And I will just say that it seems like Native women are saving the day this week. So very much appreciate that.
Very much appreciate that. You guys are all doing immense things. We need that.
We all need to support Secretary Holland because her job is going to be a bit rough.
Yes.
Johnny.
Hauka, Mahan Manuea. My name is John Eagle Spirit Elliott, and I'm a tribal councilman for the Manzanita Band of the Kumeyaay Nation. I just wanted to say, Christina, thank you, and thank you to the state for starting this initiative. But my concern is the state going to change the way it does business with tribes and dealing with other natives? I think that that's one of the issues that we really need to look at. Some of these processes and obviously some of the attitudes in some of these jurisdictions are very anti-Indian and And I think we really need to look at that. I also just wanted to mention our elders always told us, you know, we have to really remember the people who held on to the traditions and the history and the reservation in times where it wasn't good to be Indian. And so I just wanted to also mention that we really keep that in the front of our minds, and we really try to make sure that those people are remembered. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of us have parents who are in that group. And that's why we're still here. So thanks. I really appreciate that. If you'd like to expand a bit more too on your suggestion about looking at processes, it sounds like it's both at the state level, but also at the local level that you're seeing a lot of, okay.
Yeah, definitely. You know, with all aspects, Indian child welfare, feed a trust, you know, I think that, you know, relations between the tribes and state agencies and local jurisdictions, you know, those things have to be looked at. We really need to make inroads and better relationships somehow. But also, you know, looking at the specific language in some of these orders, laws, directives, and regulations that these agencies go by is really prohibitive towards natives. And that just continues those attitudes.
Thank you. I appreciate your expanding on that a bit. And I think that the council can take a look at that and can make suggestions about how to make that better. So very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? And then also, if you're not comfortable commenting on camera or you know, on the record, so to speak, you can also put something in the chat box and we can read it in. You can directly message me or Loretta and either not read it in or but just give it to us for, you know, consideration. And then again, if you've called, it's *6 to unmute your line. Carol? You're on mute.
There we go. I got it. Yeah, just let me come back to some of my ideas. So I wanted to agree with Johnny that working with various state agencies have been tough. California, as a Public Law 280 state, law enforcement, you know, justice programs, recognition of tribal court decisions, you know, protective orders, things like that. Those are all certainly necessary. ICWA is another one. Mary, I paid attention to your introduction. So yeah, you know, Kauai we're working on trying to establish a tribal court, but we also work to try to establish a tribal police force, a tribal fire department, and at every junction, it seemed like the state opposed us, you know, and it was that, you know, well, we already provide those services, which they don't. I'm sorry, but they don't, right? We're last on the list. I would also say, you know, as a tribal member and as an educator, I get so tired and fatigued. It's almost like the responsibility of teaching non-natives here in California about California Indian culture is just so draining, you know, and it's like, how did we get, you know, that responsibility dumped upon us? And it's California's own curriculum, and that ethnic studies curriculum is going through the process right now. And enhancement of particularly California Indian studies and history, I think, is hugely important to educate California's citizens. You know, so many times when we give land acknowledgements, it's the Indian people, we already know what it is, and it becomes this teachable moment for all the non-Indians, you know. And so I'd like to see the rest of California kind of catch up with us in that regard. And one of the things I would love to see, and when you travel around California, you see a number of historic markers. And it's what Dr. Beverly Ortiz has commented on, calling it the firsting and lasting process, where many times those markers commemorate the first time a Spaniard, spent the night somewhere, or made a camp or settlement, or it's the last time that a tribe was here, and it's a form of erasure. So I'd like to see a whole series of historical markers throughout the state, which not only commemorates California Indian history, but also California survivance into the 21st century. Dr. Benjamin Madley there at UCLA, that's probably 3 years old now, that the California Genocide book that he put out, it should be reading, I think, in most college campuses. So those are some of the things. And again, Johnny bringing up ICWA too, that's an important matter for our children. And for me also, reparations includes, free college, right? For California Indian youth. My daughter is a junior at UCR right now, and she's actually received no state money. She's just working her way through or what have you. And it's when you put out so little, and people are so desperate to get those dollars, it's really hard to get that. So I think that's just kind of a no-brainer. And keep in mind, as far as like the history monuments and such, the United States and the Allied forces, they forced Germany and Japan into a truth and reconciliation process. And the United States still hasn't done that in terms of African slavery, and it hasn't done so in terms of Native American history and what's happened here. And so, recently we've seen the Confederate soldier statues come down. Those monuments are coming down. And then here in California, of course, the romanticization of the mission system and Junipero Serra, and those are starting to come down. And so, I'd like to see a real effort placed into commemorating, because the thing I always say in my classes too is that Indian history is American history. It is California history, and nobody knows it. And that's really a shame, because if you don't have roots, if you don't care about your past and you don't learn from it, then you're bound to make those same mistakes again. So that's
so true.
my take.
Thank you.
Christina, this is Johnny again. If I could just make one more comment.
Sure.
Thank you for that. And I totally agree with those comments. But it's even down to state parks. State parks is, interpreting, quote unquote, a lot of our history, and a lot of it isn't correct. And, we've had a long process down here in San Diego, just even on Old Town State Park, and some of the things that they say about our people, and it's not right. And so even that's an example of, a state agency really perpetuating the wrong history. And we have an organization down here called Kanap Kwahan, which is to tell the truth. And so I think, all of those things need to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions, concerns? I see that Councilmember Burris has joined. If you'd like to introduce yourself, but no pressure.
Sure. I'll say a quick hello. I wasn't, speaking of state parks, I was supposed to be having a meeting with state parks right now on truth-telling efforts. So I wasn't planning on being in this listening session. My region's tomorrow. But yeah, I'm Anthony Burris. So I'm one of the voting members from the Eastern region. I'm a member of Ione Band of Miwok Indians. And yeah, what I was just referencing is I was also a Mellon Public Scholar last year, working with state parks on Sutter's Ford and on Marshall Gold Discovery State Park, where gold was originally discovered. And we are trying to look at reinterpreting history and correcting some of the false information that's being put out there, and tell the truth from a Native perspective. So, and I don't want to speak for state parks. I don't have that kind of authority, but I am under the impression this is just kind of the beginning of a longer process. So just to speak to what was just the comments that were just made. Yeah, I happen to be working on that. So yeah, nice to meet y'all.
Thank you, council member. And feel free, if you have questions for the group, feel free to ask them too. But we won't put you on the spot. And then I forgot to mention that what we're looking to do with council meetings is have a more standard date so that folks can kind of see it in a predictable way. These listening sessions will be the third week of every month. And what we're looking to do, because council members have different availabilities, is rotate the days that each region is. So today is a Wednesday, but next time it'll probably be the Thursday. We'll just kick everything and start over. And that way, for council members who are just not able to do Tuesdays and Thursdays, they will still be able to join on Mondays and Wednesdays when their schedule permits. And so moving forward, we'll be doing that. And then Loretta will be leading on 2 of the days, and I'll be leading on 2 of the days, but we'll both be on both probably, pending availability, but we'll be rotating. And then the council members, as I mentioned earlier, are going to be meeting a bit more frequently than quarterly for the first bit. And so we will try to get those. We're right now looking into what days and times work generally well for the council, since they don't all need to be present, but we really want them all to be present because we picked them because we like them all and we like their input. And think they all have really interesting background and input. But so just wanted to put that out there that they may be meeting monthly, more likely on a month and a half basis, just given availability. But we will let we'll post to whatever blog we make, and then also to all of the social media and via email. We'll notice everybody when those dates are available too. Okay, that was a lot. Additional feedback, comments, questions, concerns. Some of the things we talked about on Monday were about, where are good places to meet given the kind of work that this is and the kind of energy that it's inviting or could be subject to. And so there was some conversation about in Reading, there's an area where it's pretty close to where the unratified treaties were signed for that specific area, and that has a lot of weight and presence, and for non-Native participants can force them to look at something that they don't look at a lot. And so while it may be difficult for Native participants, it can also be a place for non-Native participants to kind of understand the gravity of what we're talking about here. And that there were commitments made in places that still are here, and that there's a basis for this. There were also suggestions about meeting in locations that are more culturally, I guess, significant. Spaces on the coast, spaces where you can really benefit from the healing of the place. Or places where they're significant and they're no longer in a space of Native ownership, but still are very significant for, cultural and spiritual reasons, or for historical reasons, because that's where everybody hid, or something similar to that. So just putting that out there, that was some of the conversation, in addition to some of the stuff that we talked about yesterday in terms of the arts and its place in a healing space, in addition to providing, behavioral health supports. We got a comment in the chat. Oh, okay. It's just a private comment to add to the list. So yes, I can add you.
So I think if anyone has feedback of when we're not in COVID times, where would you envision having these meetings? Oftentimes, having meetings in a state building is not the most conducive. And so I kind of just want to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
And then also, as a layer to that, how best to kind of integrate non-native, whether it's, you know, well, I think scholars, that's still the initiative of the community, but non-native folks who maybe want to benefit from a healing space, you know, and or want to understand how they can do better. We've got people in this state who are descended directly from the people who perpetrated a lot of these acts. So there's people who are interested in being involved, but we don't want this to be something that gets completely co-opted. So would be interested in, oh, we do have a hand raised. Where's that? Gabriel.
Hatu pitis kastula chakwa aksia milta. My name is Gino Gabriel Tamorano. I am of the Obispeño, Northern Chumash peoples, the Yachichi, and I am a tribal member of the Coastal Band of Chumash Nation. And I just was curious a couple of things. You probably, and forgive me, I jumped on late. I intended to be in the first two meetings earlier in the week. I just, you know, with the schedule couldn't get on until now, and I'll probably be on tomorrow's meeting just to get a recap. But if you've already touched on this, please just let me know, and I could, you know, find the information else, you know, online or just wait until tomorrow. But I'm interested to know, in terms of the ability for Indigenous folks, California Indigenous folks, to submit formal or comments or, you know, recommendations or formal communications to the council for consideration. Did you already go over that there is a process in place for that to occur, and maybe I can find that on the website?
You're muted, Christina.
This is happening more frequently. I'm getting bad at Zoom the more I do it. So what you can do is you can email, and I'll put it in the chat again. You can email to info.tribalaffairs let me put it back on, at gov.ca.gov. And then let me see if I have an actual comment space on the website. If we don't have a submit a comment space, I can make one of those by the end of the week, and that way people can do it that way too. What happens with comments is we'll review them. They're submitted in, if it needs to go to the council, we'll send it to the council. We haven't gotten anything that was that needed to be particularly acted upon. Well, we have gotten some, and we've passed along those suggestions. But mostly what we'll do is aggregate all of the stuff that comes in. And then what we'll do in the next meeting is go over the things that are actionable that came in. And so that's just kind of an overview, but you can submit formal comments to that email, or you can mail them, but it's COVID right now. So that's probably less advisable, just because everything's kind of, we're like not allowed to go get our mail right now. So, sorry, go ahead.
And that leads to my next question in terms of the process for comments, or actually the larger process in terms of what's occurring here and what's going to occur in the future in the years to come. So, and I know the executive order says that, you know, it doesn't create, this council does not create any rights or other stuff that goes against the state. But I'm curious to know whether or not there's a formal process that's in place, either codified or could be relied upon us Indigenous folks to interact with this council, or is it just, or is there not that? Is there not some formal process recognized by the state in order for the purpose of interaction, you know, consultation, and then maybe even, you know, if there's some instances where you want to move your conversation forward through the next steps, is there something, does this council have that formal process? Like many other councils, you have the California State Council on Developmental Disabilities, which is you know, established under state and federal laws. And then so within that, you have processes, formal due diligence processes where you can submit comments, you could submit and, you know, have your interactions. I'm just curious to know whether or not this council would have has that, or eventually would have that and could somehow be codified in the future under state laws.
So this council does not have policies or procedures for consultation at this point in time. It does have it's subject to open meetings, or we think it might be subject to open meeting laws. So we do run the meetings in an open meeting format. So every meeting has public comment, and everybody, the entire public, is welcome to attend meetings for the purpose of submitting public comment. In the interim, you can also speak directly to council members like Councilmember Burris, who is on right now, to give them your direct feedback, and they can report out from these listening sessions. Because we have some constraints based on open meeting laws, we can't have the full council for all of these, and it would also be kind of operationally impossible given the numerous schedules that we're juggling, but we do try to have at least one council member on each of the listening sessions. So these are all recorded and made available on the website for council members to review as well. And all of the feedback you submit here is going to be consolidated into an overview document for the council, but will also be published to the website as well to see what kind of comments were submitted in these forums. So everything you're saying here is going to be online. And so that's one way for you to be assured that people are listening. You can also speak directly to the full council in any of the meetings. And as they move forward, we're trying to have more space for public comment and that engagement. But in the first two meetings, there's just been a lot of business and we couldn't get to as much of that. But as we move forward, we're trying to have bigger blocks of public comment, with the anticipation too that until we get someone in place to facilitate the talking circles, that day before can be a full day of just public comment and engagement if we need to do that.
And this council would fall under the Brown Act then for purposes of being open meetings. Is that
not necessarily, but we are complying in the event that it is. And
then essentially maybe at some point then records would be held for the purposes of, you know, maintaining a record in order to provide a repository for, you know, for the purpose of doing the work and for folks who want to review, you know, the work that's been done. Is that something that this council will have and provide for Indigenous folks to eventually access?
I think that's something that they're going to think about. So if you have ideas about how to do that, the work itself and the records are all going to be, they have to think about, the council needs to think about how they want to archive it and where they want to host it. This was something that the Maine Wabanaki Council had to think about a lot and created a subcommittee for, which was, you know, where do we want these experiences to live, given some of the problems, challenges with certain places. So they didn't want necessarily the state to be the host for those narratives and those experiences because that felt wrong for them. It may be there's different justifications here in California where it may be part of a reparative action to have the state do that. But it's really kind of still in discussion. But the idea is that all of the conversations that I have in the consultation process are recorded and transcribed for the purpose of creating that record. And then the council itself will also think about what other sources, what other materials, what other anything they want to incorporate into the record that kind of backfills the report.
That would be good. I think that would be great to eventually have a formal process, if not codified in some means or form, so that I think that would really help the work that you guys are doing, help us with the work that you're doing, and it really, I think, will lend to a better, you know, more productive discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we had a question come in the chat. Is it possible to have the meetings in various regions of California? I can help provide outside insights based in Southern California and LA County. So we love the offer. And that is actually what is anticipated, is that when we are post-COVID, the council will be rotating into regional locations in the northern, central, southern, and eastern regions. And so those, you know, I think it'll be up to the council how they want to kind of think about it, but we're hearing some feedback that it might be nice to have at least some of the healing sessions in outdoor spaces, but the council is not, I think the only limitation we have is AV and streaming. So if we can kind of figure out that piece and we can account for that and maybe even budget for it, then it, you know, I think anything is kind of possible. That again, as I mentioned earlier, the state is still kind of under no non-essential travel type of thing because we're still in a global pandemic. But as things start to alleviate and more of the community gets vaccinated, and we kind of get into a space where it is more safe to gather, that's how the meetings will be, is on a regional basis. And then these listening sessions again will be in person with an internet option provided as well, but that will be an option as well. So one of the things that Loretta was just mentioning is, you know, as we move forward and as we get into kind of a post-COVID reality, for in-person options, does it make sense to have them during the week, or should those be weekend or after hours? What makes sense for people's availability? Just because being in person kind of require, like here you can be on a couple different meetings at once and answer your emails, but in person requires kind of a different level of commitment. And we are 3 minutes to time. So if people have thoughts and want to send them later, you're welcome to do that as well. Well, hearing none, I know we've got a lot of folks on here who have not spoken. And I know there's a lot of folks who probably want to process a bit more, want to think a bit more, or just kind of want to follow along. If you have comments, you can comment at the page I just sent you, which is tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC/contact, and that goes straight to our inboxes. You can also email the email I put in the chat as well, which is info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov. And if you could, in the subject line, just write CTHC public comment, that helps us a lot. And then the Eastern region is very much spread out. Yes, I agree. So we'll try to think a bit more about that. I think the Eastern region doesn't get enough love. And so we may try to be a bit more thoughtful about how we meet throughout the Eastern region. Just because also depending on what side of the Sierra you're on, that's a big difference in terms of travel time. So we will be really thoughtful about how we do this. And I pretty much committed the next few years of my life before COVID happened to just kind of traveling around for this. So we'll make sure to be thoughtful about that. And then yeah, I would just say if you have thoughts, you are welcome to join tomorrow as well. If there was something that you wanted to say that you couldn't quite say, so please feel free to join tomorrow. It is the Eastern region. But you know, I think the council wants to hear as much as possible. So, and every day has actually been a different conversation, which has been really interesting. So if you want to look at the other ones too, they have kind of a different, everyone has different ideas. So it's very, very interesting to have that talk. And thank you for this link, Janelle. Any final comments, Councilmember Burris?
I did kind of have one question I've been pondering really quick. When we get these, I've been getting like Facebook messages, emails from people that want to, interact with me somehow. And I'm not really sure what to do because this is all supposed to be public, right? So I don't know how much conversation I'm supposed to be having.
No. You're allowed to have conversations with people.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I would say let us know if you need support. If you need us to do anything or you need any information, we're happy to provide that. But you're allowed to have conversations with them as long as it's not with all of the other council members in the room. So.
Okay, gotcha. I just wanted a little clarification on that. Yeah, especially with these listening sessions happening right now, I've been getting a few messages here and there. So it's good to know.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Council members' contact info are not online, mostly because some folks don't like to share that publicly, but if you have anybody you'd like to get in touch with, please let us know through that email and we can see if they're, wanting to reach out as well. We may, we have to think about this a bit more, but we can think about another way to get contact info for them, but maybe email forwarding. Okay, well, we're at time. Thank you all so much for your time, your input. This was just very, very helpful for us, and we look forward to your ongoing engagement in this space. So thank you all, and take care.